Good evening and welcome. Tonight, we leave the frantic light of the modern world behind. We are traveling back to a time of long shadows and quiet hearths, the 1930s, a time known as the Great Depression. But to those who lived through it, it was simply the time of making do. As you settle into your blankets, feel the weight of your body. Much like the heavy dust that once settled over the American plains, let your breathing become slow, steady, and rhythmic. In the beginning, there was a roar of prosperity, but that roar faded into a profound, echoing silence. The banks closed their heavy bronze doors, the factories stilled their iron hearts, and the world retreated back into the kitchen. In this era, the kitchen was the center of the cosmos. The matriarch of the house stood before a wood-burning stove, armed with nothing but a dull knife and a singular, indomitable will. She did not see a lack of ingredients. She saw a challenge of the spirit. Before we cook, we must understand the vessel. In every 1930s home, there was the skillet. It was made of heavy, black, cast iron and elemental metal birthed from the deep earth, seasoned by years of salt, lard, and fire, until its surface was as smooth as dark glass. Listen to the sound of it. A low, metallic ring as it is placed upon the stovetop. It does not heat quickly like modern pans. It absorbs the heat slowly, storing it in its thick, black walls, radiating a warmth that lingers long after the fire has died down to embers. This is where our first story begins. This is the birthplace of the poor man's meal. In a world where meat was a memory and butter was a luxury, the potato was the great provider. It is a humble thing, dusty and brown, pulled from the dark ribs of the earth. But in the hands of the hungry, it is life itself. To begin the poor man's meal, we take 3 large potatoes. Feel the grit of the soil on their skins. We do not use a peeler. We use a small, sharp paring knife. The skin is removed in one continuous, spiraling ribbon. Nothing is wasted. Even the peels might be saved, fried later in a drop of oil until they are as crisp as autumn leaves. The recipe of the poor man's meal: 3 large potatoes, sliced into thin, translucent rounds. 1 large white onion, diced into small, uniform cubes. 4 hot dogs, or a few scraps of salt pork. 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil or rendered lard. A pinch of salt and a heavy dusting of black pepper. We begin by heating the oil in the heavy skillet. We do not want a raging fire. We want a gentle, steady heat. Drop 1 slice of potato into the oil. If it whispers a soft hiss, the pan is ready. Layer the potatoes into the skillet, one by one. Do not crowd them. Let them lay there in the warmth. The starch begins to release, smelling of the earth and the rain. As they cook, they change. They lose their opaque whiteness and become clear, then gold, then a deep, scorched amber at the edges. Next, we add the onion. The onion is the spirit of the Depression kitchen. It provides the aroma that fills the house. A scent so savory and thick it almost feels like a meal on its own. The onions fall amongst the potatoes like white petals. They soften, they turn translucent. They begin to caramelize, releasing a sweetness that masks the bitterness of the times. If you have the hot dogs, slice them into small coins. They are the salt of the dish. They are added last, just to brown their edges and release their smoky oils into the mix. Take a wooden spoon. Feel the smooth, worn handle in your palm. Reach into the skillet and turn the mixture over. Scrape, flip, settle. The sound is hypnotic. The clinking of the spoon against the iron, the soft bubbling of the oil, the crackle of the potato skins. We add the salt now, a slow, steady pour, like sand through an hourglass, and the pepper dark, pungent, and sharp. We cover the skillet with a heavy lid. This traps the steam, allowing the insides of the potatoes to become creamy and soft, while the outsides remain crisp. Let it sit. For 10 minutes, we do nothing but listen to the stove breathe. The house is quiet. The wind may be howling outside, rattling the window panes with dust, but inside this kitchen there is warmth. There is the smell of browning starch and sweet onion. There is the promise that for tonight the belly will be full. When the poor man's meal is finished, it is served directly from the skillet. There is no need for fancy plating. It is a rustic heap of gold and brown. As the family sits, they eat in a silence that is not heavy but respectful. Each bite is a testament to ingenuity. You are eating the marrow of the earth. The potato provides the strength to work another day. The onion provides the comfort to sleep another night. This was the first lesson of the Great Depression, that beauty can be found in the most common things, that a meal consisting of pennies can feel like a feast of the gods. If it is prepared with patience and shared in peace, the meal is over. The skillet is wiped clean with a piece of crust, never washed with soap, for that would strip away its history, its soul. The fire in the stove is dampened down. The orange glow fades to a deep, resonant red. As you lie here now, imagine the warmth of that 1930s kitchen surrounding you. The scent of the onions is just a memory now. The house is still. The only sound is the rhythmic ticking of the wind, and the slow, deep pull of your own breath. You are safe. You are fed. You are stepping into the long, dark hallway of sleep. In our next chapter, we will venture out of the kitchen and into the wild to find the bounty of the ditch, the dandelion and the wild greens that kept the spirit alive when the pantry finally went bare. But for now, just breathe. The earth is patient, the iron is cold, and the night is very, very long. Let's drift deeper now. Imagine the sun beginning to rise over a different landscape. We are leaving the sanctuary of the indoor kitchen and stepping out onto the porch. The year is 1934. The air is dry, carrying the scent of distant dust and sun-baked timber. In the Great Depression, the line between the garden and the wild began to blur. When silver coins vanished, man had to look elsewhere for his minerals, his vitamins, and his vitality. He had to look down. Tonight, we honor the bounty of the ditch. This is the story of how hated weeds became saviors. It is a story of foraging, of patience, and of the sharp, bright flavors that kept blood moving. To the modern eye, the dandelion is an intruder, a golden blemish on a manicured lawn. But in the 1930s, the dandelion was a gift from the heavens. It was the first green thing. It was a sign that the earth was still alive, still fertile, still willing to provide for those humble enough. Imagine a young girl in a faded calico dress. She carries a small, chipped enamel bucket. Her mother's task: find the young ones. Find the ones that haven't flowered yet. This is the first secret of the scarcity garden. Once it blooms, it turns bitter, tough, and woody. The prize is the young leaf, the tender, jagged green spear that tastes of deep earth and morning dew. Feel the cool dampness of the grass on your ankles. Hear the rhythmic snip, snip, snip of a small knife. This is the pace of the Depression. There is no rush, only steady collection. one leaf at a time, until the bucket is full and the sun is high. Before we can eat from the ditch, we must perform the ritual of the 3 washes. This is a meditative process, a rhythmic clearing of the grit. Imagine a large galvanized tub sitting on a wooden table. The water is drawn from a well, cold, clear, and smelling of minerals. The first wash, the greens are plunged into the water. You swirl them slowly with your hands. Feel the texture of the leaves, rough, yet delicate. The water turns cloudy as dust settles. The second wash, the leaves are lifted out, dripping and bright. The tub is emptied and refilled. This time, we add a pinch of salt to the water. The salt draws out any tiny inhabitants. We swirl again, left to right, circle, lift. The third wash, the final rinse. The water remains crystal clear. The dandelions are transformed. They are no longer weeds. They are produce, laid out on a clean flour-sacked towel to pat dry. They look like emeralds against the white cloth. A dandelion salad is not like a modern salad. It is not cold and crisp. It is a warm, transformative meal. To make it, we need a binding agent, a way to soften the bitterness of the wild. The recipe for the wilted dandelion salad: a large mound of foraged dandelion greens, cleaned and dried, 2 strips of bacon, the salt of the earth, 1 small onion, sliced into thin half-moons, a half-cup of vinegar, the sharpness of truth, a spoonful of sugar, the mercy of the pantry, 1 hard-boiled egg, crumbled if the hens were laying. We return to our friend, the cast iron skillet. We place the 2 strips of bacon into the cold pan and start the fire. Listen to the sound. As the pan warms, the bacon begins to render. The fat, the liquid gold, slowly pools in the bottom of the black pan. Once the bacon is brittle, we remove it and set it aside. Into that hot fat, we drop the onions. They hiss momentarily, then soften. Now the transformation begins. We pour the vinegar. Whoosh! A cloud of steam rises, sharp and acidic, clearing the senses. We add the sugar, stirring with a wooden spoon until it dissolves into a thin, glossy syrup. Now we take the mound of greens. We do not cook them. We wilt them. The heat of the fat and the bite of the vinegar cause the leaves to surrender. They soften, turning a dark forest green. The bitterness of the leaf marries with the sweetness of the sugar and the smoke of the bacon. But the dandelion was not the only ghost in the garden. Imagine the other greens that filled the gaps. There was poke salad, the dangerous beauty. Pokeweed grew tall and purple, but it carried a poison in its veins. To eat it was an act of extreme patience. It had to be boiled, then drained. Boiled again, then drained. 3 times the water was cast away, carrying the toxins into the soil, until only the tender, asparagus-like stalks remained. It was a lesson in persistence, that even something harmful could be made nourishing. Then there was the watercress, found in cool running streams, where the water stayed sweet. It was peppery and bright. It was the spice of the poor man. It required no fire, only a sharp eye and a steady hand in the cold current. Picture the dinner table now. The sun is setting, casting long orange fingers across the linoleum. The bowl of wilted greens sits in the center. Beside it, perhaps a few slices of depression bread, a heavy, yeastless loaf made with more prayer than flour. The crumbled egg is sprinkled over the top of the greens like fallen snow. The bacon is scattered. The sound of the meal is silver forks clicking against stoneware. There is the clink of a water glass. The flavor is intense. It is not the dull, muted taste of store-bought lettuce. It is sharp. It is metallic. It is the taste of the earth's own blood. It wakes up the tongue. It reminds the family they are part of the landscape, that as long as the rain falls and the weeds grow, they will not vanish. In the 1930s, the dandelion taught the world a lesson in value. When the structures of man faltered, the worthless weed remained. It was the ultimate democracy. The dandelion did not care if you were a fallen banker or a tenant farmer. It offered its leaves. This foraging was a quiet rebellion. It was a refusal to starve in a land of plenty. It was the ingenious scarcity that defined a generation. They learned the world is full of hidden cupboards, if only you know where to look. In the ditches, along the railroad tracks, in the corners of the orchard, there was a feast waiting for the observant. As the meal ends, the kitchen grows dim. The scraps are not thrown away. They go to the chickens or into a compost pile to feed next year's garden. Everything moves in a circle. Nothing is linear. Nothing is wasted. The feeling of the 1930s kitchen is one of profound closeness. Because things were scarce, they were cherished. The water used to wash the greens is poured onto the rose bushes. The flour sack is saved to be sewn into a pillowcase. The world feels small, manageable, and intimate. You are walking back from the ditch now, your bucket empty, your belly full of the sharp, warm greens. The crickets are beginning their evening chorus. It is a repetitive, rhythmic sound that matches the beating of your heart. The sky above is turning a deep, bruised purple, much like the skin of the pokeweed. The stars are beginning to poke through the veil of the atmosphere, one by one. They are the only lights left in this world of scarcity. Think of the millions of people who lay down in 1934, their muscles aching from the harvest, their minds calculating the cost of tomorrow. They found sleep not in luxury, but in survival. They found peace in the fact that the earth, though dusty and dry, still held secrets for those who cared to look. The air in your room is still. The blankets are heavy. The stories of the wild greens are settling into the soil of your subconscious. In our next chapter, we will return to the stovetop to witness a miracle of chemistry. The water, cocoa, and the desperation cake. We will see how lack of eggs and milk gave rise to delicious shadows. But for now, stay here in the ditch. Feel the soft, cool grass. Hear the wind whispering through the jagged leaves of the dandelion. The earth is providing. The earth is watching. The earth is at rest. Breath in the scent of the rain-washed greens. Breath out the worries. Let's drift deeper into the stillness. The night is cool, the air is quiet, and the kitchen of the 1930s is waiting for us once more. We have tasted the earth in our potatoes. We have tasted the wild in our dandelions. But the human spirit does not live by starch and greens alone. Even in the leanest years, there was a hunger for something more, hunger for a celebration, a birthday, or simply the comfort of something sweet. But imagine, if you will, the challenge. The holy trinity of baking butter, eggs, and milk had become as rare as gold coins. The hens were sold or silent. The cows were dry, or the milk was traded for coal. Yet, the grandmothers of the Depression did not surrender the dessert table. They turned to alchemy. They learned how to make the shadow of a cake, a miracle of chemistry that required no dairy and no eggs. Tonight, we explore the desperation cake, also known as the wacky cake or the depression cake. It is a recipe born of necessity, whispered from neighbor to neighbor over backyard fences, a secret code for finding joy in the void. Prepare your mind for the assembly. We are not using a mixing bowl tonight. In the spirit of making do, we will mix this cake directly in the pan. This saves the water used for washing and the flour that might be lost to the sides of a bowl. Every grain is a prayer. The inventory of the shadow, 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, the white dust of the plains, sifted until it is as light as a cloud. 1 cup of sugar, the crystalline sweetness, measured with a steady hand. 3 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder, the dark, bitter heart of the cake. 1 teaspoon of baking soda, the invisible lift, the breath of the cake. 1/2 teaspoon of salt, to sharpen the memory of the sugar. The liquid spirits, 1 teaspoon of white vinegar, the secret catalyst. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, the scent of a world far away. 5 tablespoons of vegetable oil, the slick, golden replacement for butter. 1 cup of water, the simplest element of all. Watch the process in your mind's eye. It is rhythmic, it is precise, it is a dance of geometry. We take an 8-inch square baking pan. It is weathered, perhaps a little warped at the edges from years in the wood stove. We pour the dry ingredients, the flour, the sugar, the cocoa, the soda, and the salter, into the bottom. With a fork, we whisk them together. Clink, clink, clink. The white flour turns a pale, dusty brown as the cocoa migrates through it. We level the surface until it is as flat as a Kansas horizon. Now, we perform the ritual of the wells. Using the back of a spoon, we press 3 indentations into the powder. 1 large hole and 2 smaller ones. It looks like a face staring up from the panther face of the cake yet to be born. In the first small well, we pour the vanilla. It pools like a dark, fragrant eye. In the second small well, we pour the vinegar. It sits there, clear and sharp. In the large well, we pour the oil. It is heavy and slow, filling the crater with a golden sheen. Finally, we take the cup of water and pour it over everything. Listen to the reaction. As the water hits the baking soda and the vinegar, a soft, effervescent hiss begins. It is the sound of tiny bubbles of carbon dioxide being born. This is the magic that replaces the eggs. In the absence of animal life, chemistry provides the lift. We take the fork and stir. We do not beat the batter, we fold it, over and under, round and through. The dry dust vanishes into a thick, glossy chocolate river. It smells of dark cocoa and the sharp temps of the vinegar, a scent that will soon transform into something heavenly. The oven door creaks opener, heavy iron groan. The pan is slid onto the rack. The door closes with a muffled thud. Now we wait. For 30 minutes, the house changes. The smell of baking chocolate is a powerful ghost. It drifts through the floorboards, up the stairs, and into the bedrooms. It tells the children that despite the bread lines and the dust storms, there is still something sweet in the world. In the 1930s, you didn't just smell the cake, you listened to it. You listened for the wood in the stove to crackle at just the right frequency. You watched the clock, the rhythmic tick, tick, tick of the seconds as the heat transformed the liquid into a sponge. When the cake emerges, it is dark, moist, and surprisingly light. It has no right to be this good. It is a desperation cake because it was made when there was nothing left. Yet it tastes like a triumph. While the cake cools on the windowsill, we prepare the drink of the era, water cocoa. In the 1930s, it was made with the memory of milk. We boil a kettle of water until the steam whistles a long, lonely note. In a mug, we mix a spoonful of cocoa powder and a spoonful of sugar with just a drop of cold water to make a paste. Then the boiling water is poured in to give it the mouthfeel of milk. A tiny pinch of salt and a microscopic pat of butter are stirred in. It is the poor man's coffee, a way to warm the hands and the heart. The cake is not frosted with thick buttercream. Buttercream was a fantasy. Instead, it might be dusted with a tiny bit of powdered sugar, like a light frost on a plowed field. The cake is cut into small, perfect squares. Each child receives a square, and they eat it slowly. They use their forks to pick up every single crumb. There is a profound respect for the dessert. It is not content to be consumed. It is a communion. This chapter of history teaches us about the power of the instead. Instead of butter, we used oil. Instead of eggs, we used the breath of vinegar. Instead of milk, we used the clarity of water. This is the ingenious scarcity. The flavor of life isn't in the expensive ingredients, but in the care with which they are combined. The kitchen is cooling now. The iron stove is settling, the metal contracting with little tinks and pops. Imagine yourself sitting at that wooden table. The air still smells faintly of chocolate and vanilla. It is a lingering sweetness, a reminder that you have survived another day. Your breathing is slow, like the rising of the cake. Your heart is steady, like the ticking of the kitchen clock. The darkness of the cocoa is the darkness of the night, and it is welcoming you. In our next chapter, we will look at the Hoover stew and the breadline. But for tonight, the sweetness is enough. The alchemy is complete. You have made something from nothing, and now the nothingness of sleep is calling to you. It is a soft, dark blanket. Breathe in the vanilla, breathe out the day. Let the cocoa-colored dreams take you, slowly. We leave the quiet, dust-filthied farmhouses of the plains and travel now to the city. Imagine the sound of the 1930s metropolis. It is not the roar of engines we know today. It is a slower, heavier sound. It is the rhythmic shuffle of leather soles on cold pavement. It is the low murmur of men in overcoats standing in lines that stretch around the corners of gray brick buildings. This is the era of the breadline, but in the shadows of the skyscrapers, a different kind of kitchen was born. It was the communal kitchen of the Hoovervilles, the shanty towns made of tin, cardboard, and crates that sprang up in the vacant lots of New York, Chicago, and St. Louis. Here, the ingenious scarcity took on a communal heart. No one had enough to make a meal, but everyone had something. Tonight, we sit by the communal fire. We watch the steam rise from the great soup kettles. We learn the geography of the Hoover stew. Hoover stew was not a recipe found in a book. It was a living thing, changing every day based on what the city provided. It was named, with a touch of biting irony, after the president of the era. To make it, one needed a base, a foundation of starch and salt to keep the body moving through the winter wind. The anatomy of the city stew: the base, 2 boxes of cooked macaroni or noodles of any sort. The body, 2 cans of stewed tomatoes, the red gold of the urban pantry. The protein, 1 pound of hot dogs sliced into thin, salty coins. The filler, 1 can of corn or a handful of dried beans. The spirit, whatever could be liberated from the back of a vegetable truck: a bruised carrot, a soft onion, a wilted stalk of celery. Imagine a large, soot-stained pot sitting over a fire made of scrap wood. The smoke is thin and blue, rising into the city sky. The process begins with the water. In the Hoovervilles, water was a precious resource, carried in pails from public fountains. We bring the water to a slow, rolling boil. Bubble, pop, hiss, the macaroni is added. It is the cheapest fuel for the human engine. As it softens, it releases its starch, thickening the water into a pale, milky broth. Then come the tomatoes. The sound of the can opener is the dinner bell of the strezza. Sharp, mechanical grind, pop, click. The tomatoes slide into the pot, turning the water a deep, rusty orange. They provide the acidity, the vitamins, and the illusion of richness. Next, the hot dogs. In the 1930s, these were the poor man's steak. They are sliced thin, so thin they are almost transparent, to ensure that every bowl gets at least a few morsels of salt and fat. They are dropped into the bubbling orange sea, where they bob like tiny lifeboats. If a neighbor had a stray onion, it was diced and added. If another had a handful of salt, it was sprinkled in like a blessing. The stew was stirred with a long, smoothed piece of wood, round and round. Scrape the bottom, lift and pour. The smell of Hoover stew is the smell of the city in 1932. It is the scent of wood smoke, wet wool, and simmering tomatoes. It is a scent that means tonight we do not go to bed hollow. The stew is ready when the macaroni has doubled in size, absorbing the tomato juice until it is heavy and soft. There is no al dente in a depression kitchen. We want the food to be easy to digest, warm to the core, and filling to the maximum capacity of the stomach. There were no porcelain bowls in the shantytown. The stew was served in tin cups, old peach cans, with the edges hammered smooth, or chipped mugs. Imagine holding that warm metal in your hands. It warms your palms through your thin gloves. You blow on the steam, a rhythmic hoo that calms the nerves. The first sip is thin but hot. The second bite is the soft, tomato-soaked noodle. The third is the salty burst of the hot dog. As the men eat, they do not talk of the stock market or the future. They talk of the now. They talk of the temperature of the wind and the quality of the wood for the fire. The meal creates a circle of the present. It anchors the mind to the physical sensation of warmth. To stretch the stew even further, it was often served with water toast. If the bread was so stale it could break a tooth, it was not thrown away. It was held over the steam of the pot until it softened, or dipped quickly into a bowl of hot, salted water, and then charred on a piece of hot tin. It was a ghost of a sandwich. It was crunchy on the outside, soft and damp on the inside. It provided the crunch that the human jaw craves, a psychological satisfaction that the meal was substantial. Beyond the Hoovervilles, there were the official soup kitchens run by churches and charities. Here, the recipe was even simpler. The great navy bean soup. Millions of gallons of bean soup were consumed between 1930 and 1935. It was a slow-motion recipe. The beans had to be soaked for 12 hours, a half day of waiting, then boiled for 6 hours, a quarter day of simmering. The sound of a professional soup kitchen is a drone. The hum of the industrial stove, the clatter of 1,000 spoons, the heavy tread of the servers. It is a factory of survival. The beans are mashed against the side of the pot to thicken the liquid, creating a gray-brown velvet that coats the throat and warms the chest. Standing in a bread line was a lesson in the long wait. It was the ultimate practice in patience. You moved one step every 3 minutes. Shuffle, wait, breathe. This repetitive movement is much like the process of falling asleep. You are moving away from the active world and into a state of passive endurance. You surrender your will to the line. You trust that at the end there is a ladle of warmth waiting for you. The people of the Depression learned that time has a different weight when you are hungry. A minute is an hour, a day is an eternity. But when the cup is finally in your hand, the eternity vanishes. There is only the steam and the salt. The sun has gone down behind the skyscrapers. The fires in the Hoovervilles are being banked for the night, covered with ash to keep the embers alive until morning. The men are curling up in their Hoover blankets, which were nothing more than old newspapers, layered thick to trap the body heat. Listen to the sound of the city now. It is the distant clanging of a streetcar, the whistle of a lone policeman, the rustle of the blankets as someone turns in their sleep. You are safe in your bed, far from the cold pavement, but you carry the warmth of the Hoover stew in your mind. You carry the lesson of the shared pot that even in the darkest city, a little bit of salt and a lot of water can create a sanctuary. Your breathing is as steady as the line. Your thoughts are as soft as the soaked macaroni. The red gold of the sunset is fading into the black of the night. In our next chapter, we will return to the domestic science of the housewife, exploring the milkless, butterless, eggless bread and the secret of the vinegar pie. We will see how the pantry was defended with vinegar and spice. But for now, let the city sounds fade. Let the shuffle of the feet go silent. The kettle is empty. The fire is ash. We have walked the city streets and felt the heat of the communal fire. But now we return once more to the quiet, dim light of the farmhouse kitchen. The year is 1935. Outside, the wind is a restless ghost, tugging at the latch of the back door, carrying the scent of dry earth and old cedar. Inside, there is a craving. It is the human desire for fruit, for the bright, sharp snap of a Granny Smith apple or the golden sweetness of a lemon. But the orchards are far away, and the lemons are a luxury reserved for those who still have silver in their pockets. In the 1930s, if you wanted the taste of an apple pie but had no apples, you had to perform an act of sensory deception. You had to use the spirit of the sour. Tonight, we explore the vinegar pie, sometimes called the poor man's lemon pie. It is a recipe that proves the tongue can be fooled if the heart is willing. It is a masterpiece of ingenious scarcity, where a common preservative is transformed into a delicate, custard-like treasure. To make a vinegar pie, we must first build the cradle, the crust. In the Depression, the crust was the most expensive part of the meal because it required flour and fat. We handle it with a reverence usually reserved for sacred objects. The inventory of the illusion: flour, cold, lard, salt, and ice-cold water. For the filling, water, apple cider vinegar, sugar, and cornstarch. And for the essence, a half teaspoon of nutmeg or cinnamon. Before the filling can be born, we must prepare the crust. Imagine the sound of the wooden rolling pin against the floured board. Thump, roll, swish. The lard is cut into the flour using 2 forks. Scritch, scritch. We do not want a smooth paste. We want crumbs the size of peas. When the cold water is added, the dough comes together like a tired traveler finding home. We roll it out thinner than a modern pie to make the flour stretch. We drape it over the pie tin, a dull aluminum dish that has seen 1,000 Sundays. We crimp the edges with our thumbs, a repetitive press, twist, press that seals the perimeter. The crust is baked for a few minutes alone, just to set its heart, turning it the color of a pale autumn leaf. Now we turn to the stove. In a heavy saucepan, we mix the water, the sugar, and the cornstarch. At first, it is a cloudy, uninspiring liquid. But as the heat rises, the starch begins to bloom. Listen to the whisk against the metal. Tink, tink, tink. As the mixture reaches a simmer, it suddenly clears. It becomes a thick, translucent gel, shimmering in the lamplight. Then comes the vinegar. We use apple cider vinegar, the dark, amber liquid that smells of fermented harvests. As it hits the hot sugar syrup, a sharp, bracing aroma fills the kitchen. It is a scent that wakes the brain a bright, acidic flash. But as it incorporates, something strange happens. The harshness of the vinegar is tamed by the sugar. The scent mellows. It begins to smell, quite impossibly, like a lemon grove. We add the nutmeg. The brown dust settles over the golden liquid, like silt at the bottom of a clear stream. It adds a woody, ancient warmth. This is the mask that completes the illusion of the apple. The hot, amber liquid is poured into the pre-baked crust. It flows like molten silk, filling every crevice of the pastry. The pie is slid back into the oven. We do not need a high heat. We want a slow oven, about 350 degrees. For 20 minutes, the vinegar, the sugar, and the starch marry. They thicken into a firm, tremulous custard. The sound of the kitchen now is the sound of waiting. The clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. The crackle of the wood in the fire. Snap, pop. The soft, rhythmic breathing of the family dog on the rug. When the pie is pulled out, it is not dark like a chocolate cake. It is a pale, translucent gold, like a sunset seen through a dusty window. It must cool completely. In the 1930s, patience was the primary ingredient in every dessert. You could not eat it hot, or it would run. You had to wait for the cool night air to set the structure. Imagine the family sitting round the table. The kerosene lamp is turned low to save the oil, casting a soft, golden circle on the wood. The pie is sliced. The knife makes a tiny crunch as it breaks through the lard crust. The inside is smooth, cool, and wobbles slightly on the fork. The taste is a revelation. It is not sour, it is bright. It has a temperature that cuts through the heaviness of the week's beans and potatoes. It cleanses the palate. It feels like a luxury because it is so different from the earthy flavors of the survival diet. A child closes their eyes and, for a moment, they aren't in a drought-stricken farmhouse. They are in an orchard in the rain. This recipe teaches us about balance. In a world that was flat landscapes, flat pockets, flat spirits, the vinegar provided the peak. The housewives of the Depression knew that the human spirit needs contrast. If you cannot have the sweetness of the fruit, you take the sharpness of the vinegar and tame it with the sweetness of the sugar. This is the golden mean of the kitchen. It is the ability to find the middle ground between the too sour reality of the world and the too sweet hope of the future. The pie tin is empty now, save for a few stray crumbs of crust. The vinegar bottle is back in the cupboard, its work done. The kitchen is growing colder as the fire dies down. The shadows in the corners are lengthening, becoming deep and soft. You can hear the house settling, the old wood groaning as it gives up the heat of the day. Your body feels like that pie crust light, resting and settled. Your mind is like the custard smooth, quiet and clear. The sharpness of the day's worries has been tamed by the sweetness of the night. As you lie there, imagine the rows of jars in the 1930s pantry. They are mostly empty, but the few that remain are precious. The jar of salt, the jar of sugar, the bottle of vinegar. They are the titans of the shelf, guarding the family against the void. In our next chapter, We will look at the ritual of the bean, the 12-hour soak, the 6-hour simmer, and the great northern soup that fueled the backbone of the nation. We will hear the rhythmic plink, plink of dried beans hitting a ceramic bowl. Breathe in the scent of the nutmeg. Breathe out the weight of the roll. The pie is finished. The table is clear. The kitchen is dark. Tonight, the wind has died down, and the farmhouse is enveloped in a heavy velvet silence. But if you listen closely, you can hear a rhythmic, percussive sound coming from the kitchen. Plink, plink, plink. It is the sound of the dried Great Northern bean hitting the bottom of a ceramic bowl. In the era of the Great Depression, the bean was the white gold of the pantry. It was the backbone of the American laborer, the silent fuel of the rail rider, and the steady heartbeat of the family dinner. Tonight, we follow the long path of the legume. This is not a quick meal. This is a 24-hour commitment to survival. It is a lesson in foresight, patience, and slow transformation. To make the great northern soup, we do not look for variety. We look for stamina. The bean is a concentrated miracle of sun and soil, dried until it is as hard as a pebble, waiting for the water to resurrect it. The anatomy of the anchor: 1 pound of dried Great Northern beans, the white oval stones of the field, 2 quarts of water, the resurrection fluid, 1 ham hock or a soup bone, the ghost of a Sunday roast, saved and dried, 1 large yellow onion, the savory depth, 2 cloves of garlic, the medicine of the poor, a pinch of salt, and a heavy hand of black pepper. The process begins the night before, just as you are beginning your night now. We take the pound of beans and spread them out on the wooden table. This is the sorting. We run our fingers through them, feeling the smooth, cool surfaces, slide, sift, tap. We are looking for the imposters, the tiny pebbles or bits of dried earth that escape the harvest. Once the beans are pure, they are dropped into the large ceramic crock. Plink, plink, plink. Then the water is poured over them. It is a cold, clear deluge. The beans sink to the bottom, resting there in the dark. This is the silent phase. For 12 hours, as the family sleeps, the beans are working. They are drinking. They are swelling. You might hear a tiny, microscopic snap as the skins expand. By morning, the beans have doubled in size. They have softened their hearts. They are ready for the fire. Morning comes with a gray light. The beans are drained of their soaking watery liquid that has turned a pale, dusty yellow. They are rinsed once more and placed into the heavy soup pot. Now we add the soul of the pot, the ham hock. This is a bone with just a few shreds of smoked meat clinging to it. It is tough, leathery, and smells of hickory smoke and salt. It is dropped into the center of the beans like an anchor. We add the water enough to cover the beans by 3 inches. The heat is kept low. We do not want a violent boil. We want a lullaby simmer, a single bubble rising to the surface every few seconds. The onion is diced with a steady, rhythmic chop, 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 and slid into the water. The garlic is crushed with the flat of the knife and added. Then we wait. This is the 6-hour simmer. It is the pace of the 1930s. You cannot rush the bean. You must let the heat slowly break down the fibers. After 4 hours, the kitchen begins to change. The air becomes heavy with the scent of smoke and softened starch. It is a thick smell, one that promises security. We take a wooden spoon and perform the thickening ritual. We reach into the pot and crush a handful of beans. These sacrificed beans dissolve into the water, transforming the thin broth into a rich, velvety gravy. The ham hock is now surrendering. The heat has melted the marrow and the collagen. The tiny scraps of meat fall away from the bone, dispersing themselves throughout the pot like salty stars. The bone itself is removed. Its work is done. Its essence has been moved into the soup. When the soup is ready, it is no longer a collection of separate parts. It is a union. The beans are so soft they melt on the tongue without effort. The broth is a deep, savory cream. Imagine the sound of the ladle dipping into the pot. Schloop, pour, settle. It is a heavy sound. The soup hits the bowl with a thud. This meal is served with a single piece of Hoover toast, bread that has been dried in the oven until it is as hard as a shingle. You dip the toast into the bean cream. You let it sit there for a moment, absorbing the moisture, until it is soft enough to eat. The Great Northern Soup was the insurance policy of the Depression. A pound of beans cost pennies and could feed a family of 6 for 2 days. It taught the nation that time is an ingredient. If you have no money, you must use time. You must use the 12-hour soak and the 6-hour simmer to create the richness that others buy with cream and butter. This is the deep frugality. It is the understanding that nothing of value is created in a hurry. The bean, like the human character, must be tempered by the heat and the water before it shows its true worth. The pot is empty now. The last of the bean cream has been scraped away. The heavy soup pot is washed and dried, placed back on its hook where it gleams in the fading light. The house is quiet. The belly is heavier, good, solid weight that anchors you to the bed. The warmth of the soup is still radiating from your core, moving through your limbs like a slow, golden tide. Your breathing is as slow as that simmering pot. In and out, rise and fall. The silent phase of your own night has begun. You are soaking in the stillness, softening the edges of your day. As you drift, imagine the root cellars of the 1930s, deep underground, where it is cool and dark. Rows of jars, bags of beans, piles of potatoes. They are the treasures of the earth, waiting in the silence. In our next chapter, we will explore the miracle of the cabbage, the mock sauerkraut, and the 7-layer slaw. We will hear the rhythmic scritch of the grater and learn how the humblest vegetable became the queen of the winter table. The beans are at rest. The fire is a memory. The night is a vast white bowl. Breathe in the smoke. Breathe out the toil. Let the rhythm of the simmer take you. As the memory of the great northern bean settles into the soil of your mind, we turn our gaze toward a different kind of treasure. Imagine a cold, damp cellar in the late autumn of 1936. The light is dim, catching only the edges of the wooden crates. And there, resting in the shadows, like a pale green moon, is the cabbage. In the 1930s, the cabbage was the queen of the winter table. While the tomatoes withered and the peas vanished with the frost, the cabbage remained. It was a dense, heavy orb of tightly packed leaves of vegetable built for endurance. It was inexpensive, it was hardy, and it was the ultimate canvas for the ingenious scarcity. Tonight, we honor the rhythm of the shred. We explore the 7-layer slaw and the mock sauerkraut, a process of preservation and patience that turned a humble field crop into a crisp, bright sanctuary of flavor. To prepare a 7-layer slaw was to build an edible architecture. It was a dish often served at church basements or communal potlucks, where one head of cabbage could be stretched to feed 20 souls. The inventory of the layers. 1 large green cabbage, the firm, waxy heart. 1 large white onion, the sharp, translucent slivers. 2 stalks of celery, the watery crunch. 1 green bell pepper, the spice of the north. A cup of sugar, the sweetness of the dressing. A cup of vinegar, the preservative bite. A teaspoon of celery seed, the scent of the garden. Listen to the sound of the kitchen. It is a percussive, rhythmic scritch, scritch, scritch. We take the cabbage and remove the outer leaves, the armor, leaving only the pale, tight heart. We place it on a wooden cutting board. The knife is long and thin. We begin at the top, slicing with a steady metronomic pace. Slice, slide, slice. The cabbage falls away in long, ribbon-like strands. It looks like pale green lace. This is a meditative task. It cannot be rushed. You must feel the resistance of the leaves and the release of the blade. Once the cabbage is shredded, we move to the onion. The onion is sliced so thin it is almost invisible, a ghostly presence that will melt into the slaw over time. The celery and peppers are diced into tiny, uniform cubes, green jewels, to be hidden between the layers of white. In a deep glass bowl, the construction begins. This is a set-and-forget recipe, a lesson in delayed gratification. Layer 1. A thick bed of shredded cabbage. Layer 2. A sprinkling of onions. Layer 3. The celery. Layer 4. The peppers. We repeat the process, pressing down firmly with the palm of the hand. Press, settle, pack. We want the air removed. We want the layers to touch, to exchange their essences in the dark. Now we prepare the vesper dressing. In a small pot, we heat the vinegar, sugar, and oil. We do not boil it. We only warm it until the sugar disappears into the liquid. We add the celery seeds, tiny dark specks that float like dust motes in a sunbeam. The dressing is poured over the cabbage while still warm. It hisses softly as it finds the crevices. We do not stir it. We cover the bowl with a clean cloth and move it to the coolest part of the house. It must sit for 24 hours. This is the transformation. The acid of the vinegar slowly breaks down the waxy walls of the cabbage, turning it from a tough leaf into a tender, pickled ribbon. For those who had no sugar for slaw, there was the mock sauerkraut. This was the low song of the winter. It required only cabbage, salt, and thyme. Imagine a large stoneware crock. The shredded cabbage is layered with heavy pinches of salt. Then comes the tamping. In the 1930s, a clean wooden bat or even a heavy glass jar was used to pound the cabbage. Thump, thump, thump. As you pound, the salt draws the water out of the cells. A brine begins to rise, covering the cabbage. A heavy plate is placed on top, weighted down with a clean fieldstone. For 2 weeks, the crock sits in the cellar. If you listen in the absolute silence of the night, you might hear a tiny blip, the sound of a bubble of air escaping the brine. It is the sound of life. The good bacteria are at work, turning the cabbage sour and preserving it for the months when the snow will bury the world. When the 7-layer slaw is finally served, it is a burst of light in a gray season. It is cold, it is crisp, and it carries the bite of the vinegar. Imagine the sensation on the tongue. The sweetness hits first, followed by the sharp, bracing tang of the cider vinegar. Then comes the crunch, the physical feedback that tells the brain the body is eating something fresh, even if it came from a cellar weeks ago. It is served alongside a plate of fried cornmeal mush or a simple bowl of beans. It is the bright note in a deep chord. It provides the vitamin C that kept the scurvy at bay and the spirit that kept the depression from settling into the bones. The cabbage teaches us about inner strength. On the outside, it is rough and weathered, but on the inside, it is protected, sweet, and vital. The people of the 1930s became like the cabbage. They grew thick outer skins to survive the dust and the cold, but they kept their hearts tightly packed and protected. They learned that if you stay close to your center, you can survive the longest winter. This is the ingenious scarcity of the spirit, the ability to remain crisp when the world expects you to wilt. The cellar door is closed. The cabbage crock is silent under its heavy stone. The glass bowl of slaw is resting in the icebox. The vinegar doing its quiet work. The kitchen is still. The only sound is the rhythmic creak of the house as the wind brushes against the siding. You are tucked away, layer upon layer, beneath your blankets. Your breathing is as steady as the shredding of the knife. In and out, slice and slide. The queen of the winter is guarding your pantry, and the night is guarding your rest. As you drift, imagine the trees in the orchard, standing bare and skeletal against the moon. They are sleeping, saving their energy for the spring. Below them, in the root cellars, the cabbage is doing the same. In our next chapter, we will explore the ritual of the cornmeal, the fried mush, the Johnny cakes, and the hot milk cake. We will hear the sizzle of the griddle and the soft, dry rustle of the corn husks in the barn. The brine is still. The heart is packed. The night is a pale green glow. Breathe in the cellar air. Breathe out the winter frost. Let the rhythm of the shred take you. We have tasted the earth in the potato and the frost in the cabbage. But tonight we turn to the sun of the pantry. Imagine a sun-scorched field in late August. The stalks are tall, dry, and rattling in the wind, like 1,000 skeletal fingers. This is the corn, the golden grit that kept the heart of the nation beating. When the wheat fields failed and the flour bins ran dry. In the 1930s, cornmeal was more than an ingredient. It was a foundational truth. It was inexpensive, indestructible, and carried within its yellow granules the memory of the summer heat. Tonight, we explore the fried cornmeal mush and the Johnny cake. We follow the rhythmic transformation of a dry, gritty powder into a creamy porridge, and finally, into a crisp, golden slab of survival. To work with cornmeal is to work with texture. It is not soft like flour. It is sharp and angular. It requires time and moisture to surrender its hardness. The inventory of the golden grains, 2 cups of yellow cornmeal, the coarse, sun-colored dust, 6 cups of water, the soaking spirit, 1 teaspoon of salt, the white crystal of the earth, 2 tablespoons of lard or bacon grease, the slick of the skillet, a drizzle of molasses or cocoa syrup, the poor man's gold. Listen to the sound of the kitchen. It is the rhythmic bubble. Plop, hiss. We begin by bringing 4 cups of water to a violent, rolling boil in a heavy iron pot. The salt is added, disappearing instantly into the churning steam. In a separate bowl, the remaining 2 cups of water are mixed with the cornmeal to create a slurry. This is the first secret of the 1930s kitchen. You never add dry cornmeal to boiling water, or it will knot into hard, dry lumps. You must introduce them as friends. Splosh, stir, whir. We use a heavy wooden paddle. As the cool meal hits the hot water, the pot goes silent for a moment, then begins to talk back. It thickens. It becomes heavy. It starts to blurp, releasing thick, volcanic bubbles of steam that pop with a rhythmic pock, pock, pock. We turn the heat down to the lowest ember. For 45 minutes, the mush must simmer. We stir it every few minutes, a slow, circular motion that drags the paddle across the bottom of the pot. Scrape, swirl, settle. The grit is softening. The water is being absorbed into the very heart of the grain. The mush is finished when it pulls away from the sides of the pot in a thick, translucent mass. It is no longer a liquid. It is a solid of the sun. We pour the hot, steaming porridge into a greased bread tin or a clean coffee can. We smooth the top with the back of a spoon. It looks like molten gold. It must sit overnight on the windowsill or in the cool cellar. As it cools, the cornmeal locks together. It becomes firm, cold, and dense. In the silence of the night, while you sleep, the cornmeal is completing its journey. It is becoming a loaf of scarcity, waiting for the morning fire to give it its final, crispy armor. Morning arrives with a sharp chill. We take the cold loaf of cornmeal mush and turn it out onto the cutting board. Thud. It is a solid, quivering brick. We slice it into half-inch thick rounds. Schloop, cut, slide. Each slice is a perfect, pale yellow disc. We heat the cast iron skillet our old, black friend and add a generous dollop of bacon grease. The grease melts, shimmering like a mirror. Then the slices are laid into the pan. Listen to the sound. SSSSSS is pop. It is the symphony of the sizzle. The cornmeal mush is fried slowly. We do not rush it. We want the outside to become a crust of iron, a deep mahogany brown that shatters under the fork. The inside stays creamy, soft, and sweet. We flip them once. Flip, sizzle, press. The aroma fills the house, a scent of toasted grain, wood smoke, and salt. For those who had no time for the overnight set, there was the Johnny cake. This was the bread of the road. It was a simple mixture of cornmeal, boiling water, and salt, patted into a flat disc and fried immediately in a hot pan. It was dense, it was chewy, it was portable. A man could wrap a Johnny cake in a piece of brown paper and carry it in his pocket all day. A steady source of energy as he walked the railroad tracks looking for work. It was a meal of the way. It tasted of the open sky and the dusty road. It was the food of the titans of the rail, the men who moved across the country like shadows, fueled by nothing but grit and hope. When the fried mush is served, it is often topped with a drizzle of molasses. In the 1930s, maple syrup was a dream, but molasses was a reality. Imagine the slow, dark pour of the syrup. It is thick, it is viscous. It moves across the hot cornmeal like lava, filling the little nooks and crannies of the crust. The bitterness of the molasses cuts through the richness of the bacon fat. It is a flavor of dark earth and bright sun. Each bite is a contrast. The crunch of the shell, the cream of the center, and the stick of the syrup. It is a meal that stays with you. It sticks to the ribs, providing a warmth that lasts until the sun goes down again. The cornmeal teaches us about integrity. It is a rugged grain. It does not pretend to be refined or white or delicate. It is what it is, the product of hard work and harsh sun. The people of the Depression respected the corn. They knew that as long as there was a bag of meal in the pantry, the house was a home. They learned that strength isn't about being soft. It's about being able to endure the fire and come out with a golden crust. The skillet is cooling. The last drop of molasses has been wiped from the plate with a crust of bread. The cornmeal bag is tied shut with a piece of twine, its golden dust settling back into the dark corners of the cupboard. The house is quiet. The fire in the stove is dying, the orange light flickering across the floorboards like a fading memory. You are tucked deep into your bed, as firm and settled as that overnight loaf. Your breathing is as steady as the sizzle of the pan, in and out, rise and fall. The golden grit is in your blood now, keeping you warm, keeping you steady. The sun is gone, the grain is ground, the night is a field of gold. Breathe in the toasted air, breathe out the dust of the day. Let the rhythm of the sizzle take you. We have traveled through the fields of corn and the cellars of cabbage, but tonight we enter the realm of the invisible. In the year 1937, the refrigerator was often a hollow echo. The milkman had stopped his morning clink of glass against stone. The butter dish sat empty, polished by 1,000 hopeful knives. But the human palate has a long memory. It remembers the silk of cream and the richness of the churn. To survive the depression was to become a master of the ghost. Tonight, we explore water, cocoa, and milkless, butterless, eggless bread, often called war bread or boiled raisin bread. These recipes do not ask for what you don't have. They take the clarity of water and the heat of the fire and conjure the feeling of luxury from thin air. To bake without dairy is to rely on extraction. We must pull the flavor out of dried fruits and spices, using boiling water as our messenger. The inventory of the invisible: 2 cups of water, 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of raisins, 2 tablespoons of lard, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and ½ teaspoon of cloves, 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Listen to the sound of the stove. It is a rhythmic hiss, bubble, steam. Unlike modern bread, this begins with a cauldron. We place the water, the sugar, the raisins, the lard, and the spices into a pot. We bring it to a boil. Glub, glub, for 10 minutes. The kitchen is transformed. The boiling water forces the raisins to swell, plump and dark, releasing their deep, wine-like sweetness into the liquid. The cinnamon and cloves bloom in the steam, creating a fragrance so thick it feels like a physical presence in the room. This is the extraction phase. We are creating a richness that doesn't rely on a cow. We are making a syrup of survival. Once the mixture is dark and fragrant, we take it off the heat. It must cool until it is just lukewarm. Wait, breathe, settle. Now we add the flour and the baking soda. The white powder hits the dark, spiced liquid and vanishes. We stir with a heavy wooden spoon. Thwack, fold, stir. The batter is not light and airy. It is heavy, sticky, and the color of a wet-tilled field. There is no kneading here, no rhythmic pounding of dough on a board. This is a quick bread, a gift to the tired mother who has no strength left for the labor of yeast. The batter is poured into a greased tin. It settles into the corners with a heavy thud. It enters the oven. For 1 hour, the house is filled with the scent of the ghost. It smells like a holiday. It smells like a time before the banks closed. It is the scent of cinnamon masking the reality of the water base. While the bread bakes, we prepare the evening's comfort. In the 1930s, milk was for the youngest children. The adults drank the shadow. The recipe for water: cocoa, 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder, 1 tablespoon of sugar, a tiny pinch of salt, 1 cup of boiling water, and a smidge of butter. We start with the paste. We mix the cocoa and sugar with a single teaspoon of cold water, stirring until it is a glossy, dark mud. Then, the boiling water is poured from the kettle. Whoosh, the steam rises. to give it mouthfeel, the secret of the 1930s. We add that tiny pinch of salt. Salt tricks the tongue into perceiving richness where there is only water. We stir until the surface has a thin, dark foam. It is hot, it is bracing. It is the darkness that warms. The bread is pulled from the oven. It is dark, nearly black from the spices and the boiled raisins. It is dense, so dense it feels like it could hold up the weight of the world. Listen to the knife as it passes through the crust. Crunch, give, slide. We do not spread butter on this bread. It is already moist from the boiling ritual. We eat it in thin, deliberate slices. The taste is deep. It tastes of the earth, the sun, and the fire. It is a meditation on absence. You do not miss the milk because the spices are so loud. You do not miss the eggs because the raisins are so chewy. It is a masterpiece of the instead. This chapter teaches us about sensory substitution. The people of the Depression learned that the idea of a flavor is often as powerful as the ingredient itself. They learned that a house smelling of cinnamon is a house that feels safe, regardless of what is in the bank. This is the ingenious scarcity of the mind, the ability to satisfy the soul when the body is being rationed. It is the understanding that enough is a state of being, not a volume of cream. The cocoa mug is empty, a dark ring at the bottom marking the end of the day. The raisin bread is wrapped in a clean cloth, tucked away like a secret in the cupboard. The kitchen is cold now. The fire has retreated into the ash, leaving only the scent of cloves lingering in the rafters. You are tucked into your bed, your senses satisfied by the ghosts of the pantry. Your breathing is as steady as the boiling of the kettle, in and out, rise and fall. The spices are in your breath now, warming you from the inside out. As you drift, imagine the thousands of kitchens across the country in 1937, all smelling of this same war bread, a silent, spiced brotherhood of survival. Everyone drinking their water, everyone watching the embers, everyone waiting for the morning. In our next chapter, we will explore the ritual of the mock apple, the Ritz cracker pie. We will learn how a simple, salty cracker was transformed into the queen of the orchard, and hear the rhythmic crunch of the box opening in the dark. The milk is a memory. The spices are the truth. The night is a dark, warm silk. Breathe in the cinnamon. Breathe out the hollow day. Let the rhythm of the boil take you. We have seen the bread made without milk and the cake made without eggs. But now, as we reach the year 1938, we encounter the greatest magic trick of the Great Depression. Imagine a child sitting at a kitchen table, craving the tart, crisp bite of a harvest apple. But the trees are bare, the baskets are empty, and the only thing in the pantry is a sleeve of salty, buttery crackers. This is the birth of the mock apple pie. It is a recipe that defies the laws of nature. It is a story of how the industrial age, the era of the boxed cracker, met the scarcity of the earth to create an impossible sweetness. Tonight, we explore the Ritz cracker pie. We follow the rhythmic snap of the cracker and the chemical mystery of the cream of tartar as we turn a salted biscuit into a forbidden fruit. To make an apple pie without apples is to rely on structural deception. We are building a memory of a fruit using a foundation of baked wheat. The inventory of the illusion: 2 sleeves of Ritz crackers, the salty stars, about 36 crackers, 2 cups of water, the carrier of heat, 2 cups of sugar, the granulated mercy, 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar, the acid of the orchard, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, the bright note. 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, the woody scent. 2 tablespoons of butter, the richness of the crust. Listen to the sound of the box opening, RRR, RIP. Then the crinkle of the wax. Paper, crackle, snap. We take the crackers, one by one. We do not crush them into dust. We break them into chunky pieces, roughly the size of an apple slice. Snap, pop, drop, as the crackers fall into the pre-baked pie crust. They create a landscape of jagged edges and salty surfaces. This is the skeleton of our pie. It looks nothing like an apple. It looks like a mistake, but wait, the alchemy is coming. On the stove, we begin the syrup. We combine the water, the sugar, and the cream of tartar. This is the secret ingredient. Cream of tartar is an acidi byproduct of winemaking. When boiled with sugar and water, it creates a flavor profile that mimics the malic acid found in a Granny Smith apple. Listen to the whisk against the pan, chime, 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 as the syrup reaches a boil. We let it simmer for 5 minutes. It becomes clear, thick, and incredibly fragrant once we add the cinnamon and the lemon juice. This hot, acidic syrup is poured directly over the dry crackers. Sizzle, hiss. The crackers do not dissolve. Instead, they absorb. They swell up, losing their crunch, but maintaining their body. They become translucent and slippery. Under the heat, the starch in the crackers and the acid in the syrup combine to create a texture that is quite miraculously identical to a cooked apple slice. We dot the top of the crackers with the 2 tablespoons of butter. Then we drape the top crust over the mound. We use a fork to prick the surfacer. Rhythmic poke, poke. Poke 2. Let the steam escape. The pie enters the oven. For 35 minutes, the mockery becomes the reality. The scent of cinnamon and lemon drifts through the house, deceiving the nose of anyone who passes by. "Is that apple pie?" they ask, and the mother in the kitchen smiles a weary, triumphant smile. When the pie is pulled out, it must rest. The syrup needs to thicken into a jelly around the cracker apples. Listen to the sound of the cooling, tink pop. The crust is contracting. When the first slice is taken, the interior is a beautiful amber-colored mound of fruit. The taste is the ultimate ingenious scarcity. The salt from the crackers balances the sweetness of the syrup. The cinnamon provides the old-world comfort, and the texture the soft, slightly resistant give of the soaked crackers, so close to an apple that the mind simply accepts the lie. It is a meal of faith. You eat it because you believe in the possibility of sweetness, even when the orchard is dead. The Ritz cracker pie teaches us about adaptability. It shows that when the natural world fails us, we can use the tools of our own making to fill the gap. It is a testament to the resilient imagination. The people of the 1930s were not just surviving, they were reframing. They were taking a crackera, product of a factory, and turning it back into a product of the earth. They were refusing to let the Depression take away their Sunday dessert. They learned that a fake apple eaten with love is more nourishing than a real apple eaten in solitude. The pie plate is empty, save for a few stray buttery flakes of crust. The cracker box is folded shut. The stove is cooling, its iron skin turning from a dull red to a cold, resonant black. The house is still. The wind has dropped, and the stars are out, looking like the salt crystals on a cracker scattered across a dark velvet table. You are tucked deep into your blankets, your senses satisfied by the great illusion. Your breathing is as steady as the simmering syrup. In and out, rise and fall. The sweetness of the mock apple is a lingering warmth in your chest. As you drift, imagine the millions of mock meals served across the decade. Mock duck made of breadcrumbs, mock turtle soup made of beans, mock apple pie made of crackers. A whole world built on the power of instead. It is a world that is now at rest. In our next chapter, we will explore the ritual of the breadline bread and the hardtack of the dust bowl. We will hear the rhythmic thump of the flour sack and the whistle of the wind through the cracks in the cabin. The box is empty. The syrup is set. The night is a golden, buttery crust. Breathe in the cinnamon. Breathe out the day's deceptions. Let the rhythm of the snap take you. Let the weight of your blankets become a shield against the imagined wind. Tonight, we stand in the center of the storm. Imagine the Great Plains in 1938. The sky is not blue, but a bruised, heavy brown. The wind carries the topsoil of 3 states. A black blizzard turns noon into midnight. In the heart of the Dust Bowl, the kitchen was a fortress. Women hung wet sheets over the windows to catch the grit, but the dust still found its way in, settling into the tea, the beds, and the very pores of the skin. In this world of it was the white dust of life, guarded in heavy cotton sacks. Tonight, we explore the hardtack of the plains and the flour sack ritual. We follow the rhythmic thump of the dough and the stitch of scarcity as we learn how a bag of grain became both a meal and a garment. To make the bread of endurance, we do not use yeast. Yeast is a living thing, and in the heat of the dust storms, it was hard to keep alive. We use the ancient method, the way of the sailor and the pioneer, the inventory of the stone. 3 cups of all-purpose flour, the white shield, 1 cup of water, the binding spirit, 2 teaspoons of salt, the preservative, a heavy wooden board, and a rolling pin. Listen to the sound of the kitchen. It is a rhythmic thud, thud, thud. We mix the flour, water, and salt into a dough, so stiff it feels like clay. There is no fluff here. There is no rise. We place the dough on the wooden board. We do not knead it gently. We pound it. We use the rolling pin like a hammer, flattening the dough into a sheet. A half-inch thick thump, roll, flip. The sound is hypnotic, a steady beat that matches the ticking of the clock against the howling of the wind outside. Once the dough is flat, we cut it into squares. Then we perform the piercing. We use a clean nail or a fork to poke deep holes into each square. Poke, poke, poke. This ensures the bread dries completely, removing every molecule of moisture. Without moisture, the bread cannot rot. It can sit in a tin for a year, waiting for the day when there is nothing else to eat. The hardtack enters a slow oven. It does not bake. It desiccates. It turns from a pale white to a hard, bone-colored gray. When it comes out, it is as hard as a ceramic tile. You cannot bite it. If you tried, you would break a tooth. This is the bread of the long wait. To eat it, you must submerge it in a cup of water, coffee, or a bowl of thin soup. Listen to the sound of the bread hitting the table. Clack. It sounds like stone, but as it soaks in the warm liquid, it slowly, very slowly, surrenders. It softens into a chewy, salty mass that provides the weight the stomach needs to stop its growling. It is the ultimate survival food, a silent sentinel in the pantry. But the ingenious scarcity did not end with the bread. In the 1930s, the bag that held the flour was as valuable as the grain itself. Imagine the mother sitting by the kerosene lamp after the bread is baked. She takes the empty cotton sack. It is heavy, high-quality muslin. She soaks it in a tub of lye to remove the inked labels. Pride of the plains. Listen to the rhythmic scrub, scrub, scrub of the washboard. Once the ink is gone, the fabric is bleached white in the sun. Then the sewing begins. Stitch, pull, snip. From these bags, she creates dresses for her daughters, shirts for her sons, and pillowcases for the beds. The flour companies eventually caught on. They realized their bags were the only fabric store many women could afford. So they began printing the sacks with beautiful floral patterns, lilacs, daisies, and geometric vines. The kitchen became a workroom of beauty. A woman would buy a specific brand of flour, not for the grain, but because she needed 3 more yards of the blue rose pattern to finish her daughter's Sunday dress. Outside, the wind continues its rhythmic she against the house. The mother takes the wet flour sack sheets and hangs them over the cracks in the door. The water in the fabric catches the dust, turning the white cloth into a muddy brown. This is the dual nature of the 1930s. The flour fed the body, and the bag protected the home. There was no waste. The idea of throwing away a piece of cloth or a crust of bread was a sin against the effort of survival. Everything was used, everything was reused, everything was cherished. The hardtack teaches us about durability. It shows us that to survive a storm, you must sometimes become as hard as the stone. You must remove the softness that would allow you to spoil. The people of the Dust Bowl became hardtack people. They were weathered, they were tough, and they were salted by their own sweat. But like the bread, when they were placed in thee and they shared their hope, the oven is cold. The hardtack is tucked into a tin box, its clack echoing in the quiet room. The sewing needle is stuck into a pincushion made of scrap fabric. The floral dress is hanging on a peg, waiting for the morning. The house is quiet, save for the muffled drum of the dust against the roof. You are tucked deep into your bed, beneath pillowcases that once held 50 pounds of flour. They are soft, worn thin by 100 washings, smelling of lavender and old sun. Your breathing is as steady as the stitch of the needle, in and out, push and pull. The white shield is all around you, keeping you safe, keeping you warm. As you drift, imagine the thousands of miles of floral dresses walking across the plains, a parade of patterns against a brown world, a testament to the fact that even in a desert of dust, the human spirit demands a flower. In our final chapter, we will explore the ritual of the Sunday roast, the pot roast of the miraculous stretch, and the bread pudding of the inn. The cloth is a comfort. The night is a white, sturdy weave. Breathe in the scent of the clean cotton. Breathe out the grit of the world. Let the rhythm of the stitch take you. Let the final curtain of the day draw closed. We have walked through iron-hard winters and dust-blown summers. We have eaten the weeds of the ditch and the crackers of the pantry. Tonight, we arrive at the altar of the Sunday table. Even in the deepest hollows of the Depression, one day stood apart. Sunday was a boundary where labor ceased. The flour sack dresses were pressed crisp, and the kitchen produced a miracle of the stretch. Tonight, we explore the pot roast of the 7-day stretch and the bread pudding of the end. This is the final ritual of ingenious scarcity. It is the art of making a single pound of meat feed a family of 6, turning crumbs into a dessert of gold and cinnamon. To cook a Sunday roast in 1939 was a feat of volumetric expansion. We sought the tough cut, muscles that worked as hard as the people. The inventory of the miracle: chuck roast, the fibrous heart; potatoes, the heavy filler; carrots, the sweet earth; onions, the aromatic spirit; water, vinegar, and flour to cloak the meat. Listen to the sound of the kitchen. We begin by dredging the meat in flour-white dust that will create a thick, brown gravy. The cast-iron pot is heated until it radiates a dry, heavy warmth. A tablespoon of lard is melted. We drop the meat in SSS. We sear it on all sides until it is dark, crusty, and mahogany brown. This Maillard reaction is the only luxury we can afford. It creates the illusion of a massive feast through the intensity of its scent. Once the meat is seared, we add the water. We do not drown the roast, we braise it. We add a tablespoon of vinegar, the same secret we used for the pie, to break down the tough connective tissues. The lid is placed on the pot with a heavy metallic clink. For 4 hours, the roast simmers. Glub, glub, glub. The heat is so low, it barely disturbs the surface of the liquid. Inside the dark, iron womb of the pot, the fibers of the meat are surrendering. They are loosening their grip, becoming tender, tender enough to be pulled apart with a wooden spoon. 2 hours before dinner, we add the infantry, the potatoes and carrots. They are chopped into large, rugged chunks. They sit in the broth, absorbing the fat and the salt of the meat. This is the stretch. By the time the meal is served, the meat has shrunk, but the vegetables have swollen. The gravy has thickened into a dark, glossy velvet that coats everything. When the platter is brought to the table, it looks like a mountain of abundance. Imagine the sound of the family sitting down, the scraping of chair legs on wood, the quiet grace whispered over the steam. The meat is not carved, it is distributed. Each person receives a small piece of beef, but a mountain of savory, meat-flavored potatoes. It is a meal that satisfies the memory of meat while filling the belly with the reality of the earth. But the Sunday grace does not end with the roast. There is the final collection, every crust of bread that was too hard to eat during the week. Every heel of a loaf, every stray crumb has been saved. This is the bread pudding, the recipe of the fragments. 4 cups of stale bread cubes, the hardened days. 2 cups of milk or watered-down cream. Half cup of sugar. 2 eggs, the Sunday luxury. A handful of raisins, and a heavy dusting of nutmeg. The stale bread is broken into pieces with a rhythmic snap, crunch, crumble. The milk, sugar, and eggs are whisked together and poured over the dry bread. We let it soak for 30 minutes. The bread drinks. It softens. It regains its youth. It is baked until the top is a golden, crusty brown, and the inside is a soft, custardy cloud. It is served warm, perhaps with a hard sauce made of a little sugar and a drop of vanilla. It is the end of the week in a bowl. It is the proof that nothing, not even a crumb's, ever truly lost. The meal is finished. The Sunday best plates are washed by hand, dried with a floral sack towel, and put away for another 7 days. Listen to the sound of the kitchen now. It is the final clink of the cupboard door. The fire in the stove is being raked out, the orange embers cooling into gray ash. The great silence of the 1930s night is descending. This was the Sunday grace. It was the reminder that even in a decade of less, there could be enough. It was the ability to take the fragments of a hard week and turn them into a pudding of peace. The Great Depression Cookbook is not a book of recipes. It is a book of values. It teaches us that patience is an ingredient, that water is a luxury, that observation is the best spice. The people who lived through these 2.5 hours of history were the masters of the full circle. They understood that the potato feeds the man, the peel feeds the pig, and the pig feeds the soil. Everything is connected. Everything is significant. As you lie there now, feel the full circle of your own day. The labor is done. The hunger is gone. The darkness is not a void. It is a Sabbath for your mind. The pantry door is shut. The latch is turned. The kitchen is cold and dark. The smell of the roast has faded. The scent of the nutmeg is a ghost. The only thing left is the rhythm of your own heart. Your breathing is as slow as the 4-hour braise, in and out, rise and fall. You are as settled as the bread pudding in its dish. You are as safe as the flour in its sack. Imagine the millions of people from 1939 finally seeing the light of a new era on the horizon. They are leaning back in their chairs, their bellies full of Sunday potatoes, watching the stars. They are the titans of endurance, and they are inviting you to join them in the great rest. The road is long, but the bed is soft. The wind is loud, but the house is still. The history is over. The sleep is here. Breathe in the peace of the Sunday grace. Breathe out the weight of the 100 years. Let the silence of the iron pot take you slowly, deeply, sleep.